The idea here is, I guess you could get S8, and if you call your assailant the quote F slur, you go to jail, right? Some country you got there. Some country you got there. By the way, let's point this out that progressives have for years, as these guys say, hey, we don't want to put in hate speech laws and have people arrested and this and that. They've been doing the same type of stuff for years. They do depersoning, debanking, deplatforming, keeping people away from their cash. If you touch on any issues that they don't like, they've been doing that for years to conservatives. So they're doing the exact same thing that the government over there is doing. They're just using the private marketplace to do it. So what they do is they will go on these massive campaigns to deperson a human being from society because they have wrongthink, or they say a word that makes somebody else upsetty spaghetti, right? That's what they do. And the fact of the matter is like, who gives a who cares if this woman didn't care? Who cares if she was like, you know what, I am homophobic, and I said it because I'm homophobic. That's her business, right? You can say what you want. You're supposed to, at least in free nations, and that's not what you have there. And that was Tucker Carlson's point. You don't have a free nation there. You have a nation which is under a dictator.
Hang on, Mark. Out of interest, Andrew, would you use that word?
Sure, you use it all the time. It's one of the best ways to describe friends. Right?
Would you use it? Would you use it on a show like this? It's not
meant to be. Look, it's not meant to be. Can I say it?
Would you say it? I mean, would you normally use a word like that?
Well, I wouldn't say it for the purposes of TOS, but I mean, if I was allowed to, sure, it's one of my favorite words to say. There's nothing wrong with the word. What happens is this. This word is not even being used as a homophobic slur, and it hasn't since I was a kid, okay? That's the truth. People call each other this all the time for literally for fun, just because it's fun. You'll go, you like run into a buddy of yours. What's up, F slur? Right? You don't care. And you give each other a high five.
I don't think that's true, though.
It's fun. It is true. Look,
no, I think if you ask people, they will tell you it is often used in a derogatory way and offensive way intended to demean them, and it's done all the time. I don't think we can dispute that.
But you know what? Everything, you can use any word as derogatory if you want to, or you can use words and they're not derogatory. It depends on the context, and we're social creatures. I'm tired of people acting like socially everybody's. We know that there's context for words, and when you say in proper context, this word to buddies and people in this, whatever, it's not a problem socially, and it never has been. And Mark might shake his head, but I bet you in high school, he was calling half of his friends that word, and they were probably calling it to him back. Why? Because it's funny. That's why it's funny. And
were you Lamont Hill?
So here's, was I? No, but
you've never used any derogatory term at school about anyone as a joke?
You're asking a different question now than, okay.
Well,
now
just
you're asking
generally.
a different question. His question was, again, the answer to the first question is no, I didn't use the F word in high school as he alleged. Second question is, have I ever used an offensive term? Absolutely. When I was a child, but as an adult, I like to think that I've grown beyond using the words that I used as a child. And I agree that social context matters, and I agree that we should always consider social context. We live in a society where people are still abused, where people are still slandered, where people are still physically assaulted, where people are marginalized. And that F word is used very often to do, and it's often accompanied by harm. And so if we know that, I agree, when you walk up to your friend and give him a high five and use that word, you may not be attempting to smuggle in homophobia. I don't think you are. But what I'm saying is we're normalizing a word that still accompanies harm and still kind of normalizes what we do and how we treat as a society, LGBTQI folk. And so I'm just saying, okay, why don't we pick a different word that doesn't cause all this hullabaloo?
All right, the bigger issue.
The problem is like, because they're not as fun. And the reason is, the more that you try to make these pushbacks, these social pushbacks, and tell people what they can and can't say, it makes them want to say it more. And you know what, Mark? Like, that's what happens. The second you start making social pushback and say, hey, this word you've been calling your friends and you guys have been joking around for years saying this stuff, you're not allowed to say it anymore because now somebody's going to get too upset about it. It literally gives them incentive to say it more. That's what happens. That's how social context actually works.
But that's not what I'm saying.
If you guys wouldn't make a big deal out of it, if you guys wouldn't make, hang on, Mark, almost done. If you guys wouldn't make a big deal out of it, we wouldn't have a big deal. right? But you guys make the big deal out of it.
All right.
Why
does nobody get arrested for calling Donald Trump?
Well, no, but you know what? The thing is interesting because I do think...
It's not just interesting, it's probably the most egregious thing you could possibly call somebody, is comparing him directly to Adolf, who murdered 12 million people, who gassed 6 million Jews in concentration camps, right? The idea that
maybe the Americans should bring in some speech laws.
The idea that that is not an arrestable offence by comparison to using the F word against a person seems to me to be completely disproportionate.
Well, you're absolutely right, but here's my thing. I think that the thing is an interesting thing because actually this proves that it's not a left or a right-wing issue because actually since the assassination of Charlie Kirk and those 2 attempts on Donald Trump's life, the right has been saying, watch your rhetoric. And they understand that whilst people aren't calling for violence against them, speaking about them as is increasing the likeliness of someone thinking, oh my God, I better get a gun and do something about it. So they understand
they're not calling for their
not
arrest,
calling for violence, but calling them words starts that dehumanization that leads to violence. So thank you for proving my point.
This is sick. This is actually sick what you're saying, dude. What you're saying is that you're calling for people to be arrested for words that make you upset. That's sick. This is the country of John Locke. Hang on. This is the country of John Locke. This is the country that was supposed to, we adopted our constitution based on these principles of free speech. And, you sick bastards are running around actually calling for the arrest of people because they say mean words. What the hell is wrong with you?
This is the thing with free speech. You can still make your point. You can still make your point. What is it that you can't say? It's not my fault that people can't articulate themselves well. You can talk about crime statistics based on gender and sexuality and race, whatever you want.
Why
you just can't use discriminatory words to do it.
Care worker who's angry because she's been assaulted and is in hospital and is firing off her angry thoughts while she said she had a head injury, and she uses this F word, and because of that she ends up with a conviction.
Well, hold on, Piers. We only got her side of the story. Reading the articles, it says that there was a series of abusive and homophobic messages.
Yeah.
Those were then showed the friends.
They weren't homophobic.
The friend that she said
they weren't homophobic.
Hold on, that's what the prosecutor said.
They weren't aimed at somebody for their sexuality.
But so what if I go up to someone in the street? So if I go up to someone in the street and start attacking them?
Well, okay. By comparison, if I use the N word against you,
I still haven't had a chance to respond to you.
Right? Or if I use the N word against Andrew, is that a racist slur against him? No.
No. So if I go up in the street and start...
There has to be some intent, surely.
No, if I start going up to someone in the street and screaming anti-Semitic things at them, and then it turns out they're not Jewish, the police aren't going to be like, oh, well, like you went to attack someone based on the...
Hang on, but that's my point, though. If you can't be anti-Semitic against somebody who's not Jewish.
But we go back to, I think it's worse, because the slur was made to make him seem like less of a man, to sort of dehumanize him.
She didn't intend it like that, and I think intent does matter. Mark, you wanted to jump in about the thing. What was your observation about that? My only point about I don't think, by the way, I don't think people should be arrested for either. But it just seems to me extraordinary disparity between you can just casually call somebody a and compare them to Adolf, and there's no accountability. But if you use the F word in a private text, you get arrested by 11 cops.
Yeah, we're in like 7 directions here, so I'm going to just try and in like 10 seconds deal with each one, total. First, I agree that no one should be arrested for any of this speech. Let me say that. So this is not a defense of arresting people, because that keeps being said. I'm not defending that. I do think that piece is different, but it doesn't mean that it should be responded to differently. For example, you may say to me, Piers, because you're policing my speech around not using the F word or the N word or whatever, that you're a fascist. That would be a reasonable criticism. I think you'd be wrong, but I think that'd be a reasonable criticism. But you'd be saying that my behavior is actually similar to that of a particular thing. When people are looking at Donald Trump's behavior, it's not casual at all. They're saying the extraordinary and maybe historically unprecedented way that he is undermining American democracy is reminiscent of the regime. You may disagree. I'm not telling you to be wrong or right.
You don't honestly think that.
Well, let me.
You honestly think Donald Trump is a.
Piers, if you allow me to finish, you'd understand that I'm not saying that. Just allow me to finish the sentence. My next sentence was, it does not matter whether you agree or disagree with the claim. The point is, I'm allowed to have a political ideology. And I wouldn't make that claim, by the way. I wouldn't call Donald Trump But my point is
it a
if
slur?
I believe that, and I'm
is
making
it a slur against Donald Trump?
No.
Wow.
That's my Piers. I'm the one saying no.
So it's not a slur to call somebody.
Arguing.
It's not a slur to call somebody, but it is a slur to use the F word about somebody who's not even. Explain that.
No. I can't explain what you just said because that's not the point I'm making. You've recharacterized what I said.
I'm not sure what the point is you're making.
What I'm saying. Allow me to finish, and you will. What I'm saying is, if you are making an analysis of somebody and you in good faith believe that their behavior, similar to if you call me a fascist, I don't think I'm a fascist, but you have a right to say that, and I wouldn't call that a slur. If my behavior is reminiscent of that, similar to the or any other argument that you make, I'm not going to call it a slur just because I disagree with you. Where it becomes different is if I'm attacking somebody for their identity. Where I am insulting somebody for their identity, that becomes a slur. And in the last example you gave, Piers, where somebody calls somebody the F word or somebody high-fives their friend, as my other colleague said, it gives them a high five and they're not even, and they don't mean it that way. It may not be a slur, but you're still trafficking in homophobia. You're still trafficking in racism.
All right,
Piers,
Hang on. This is an illogical. This is actually illogical. Listen, I'll tell you why. The reason that this is illogical is because
and then allow me to respond, because every time you respond and tell me something, I don't get to respond. Go ahead.
Hang on, I understand, but the foundation of your argument is these words cause harm based on social stigma, and the social stigma is caused because you're using a harmful word. Calling people fascist would create this exact same stigma that you're saying these other protected classes deserve. Your argument is a contradiction. It's P and not P at the same time. It's contradictory. So either it's one or the other, Mark. Either the social stigma needs to be guarded against. Hang on. And in the UK, people are getting arrested for calling Donald Trump as much as they get arrested for calling somebody the F slur, because the social stigma is the thing that you're after. So you have to pick one, dude. Pick a lane.
All right. Now allow me to respond. Again, you have mischaracterized my argument. My point is not that social stigma is the predicate for deciding whether or not someone can say something or not. If it were, then you would be right. All words can have social stigma. I could call you a conservative,
then what is it?
And you could have a social stigma. You could call.
Then what determines
again,
it?
Allow me to finish now. Please allow me to finish. You insisted on being allowed to finish. Let me do the same.
Yeah, I know. I just want the answer though. What could it be?
Do you think it's easy to get the answer if you let me talk or if you don't?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, what I'm saying is, again, if just all words can potentially have stigma. If you call me a bleeding heart liberal, I may find that to produce stigma for me. I'm not saying that stigma alone is the issue. Stigma is not the predicate for me. And again, I'm not making the case that anybody should be arrested for any of it because it's so gray and slippery. I'm saying don't arrest anybody for any of the slang or any of the slurs, any of the language, any of the words that are being used against people. I'm saying don't arrest anybody for any of it. But the distinction I'm making here is not one of slur versus or stigma versus non-stigma. What I'm saying is that as a community, we can certainly agree that assessing someone's behavior, even if it causes stigma, is okay. You not liking it isn't enough for me to stop saying it. What I'm saying is if we as a community decide that, hey, this particular word, this particular framework has historically caused harm to people, not based on what they believe, not based on anything they've done, but based on a particular identity category, I'm saying we can make different decisions. We may not agree on what the decision is. That's
stigma,
okay.
though, Mark.
But
that's stigma. You are making a foundation.
Let me jump in. Hang on.
Stigma is not the foundation for my stigma is not the foundation.
You just don't realize
all words can produce. It's not.
Let me ask Andrew a question.
You don't realize it.
Let me ask Andrew a question.
That's not what it's. Just repeatedly shouting it is doesn't change the fact that it's not.
I'd like to ask a question.
Let
me ask a question.
I'm stipulating.
Let me ask a question.
I'm stipulating that it can all have stigma.
Mark, let me ask you a question of Andrew, which is about free speech, but it's a different twist on it. Because it's all been very anti the UK, this debate, as indeed the debates raised in America about our free speech issues, which are legitimate. I agree. But a Reuters report recently said that more than 600 Americans were fired, suspended, placed under investigation, or disciplined by employers for comments about Charlie Kirk's assassination. That was after a review of court records, public statements, local media reports, and interviews. Some were dismissed after celebrating or mocking Kirk's death. 15 were punished for allegedly invoking karma or divine justice. 9 others were disciplined for variance on good riddance. Other offending posts appeared to exult in the or express hope that other Republican figures would be next. And we just had the president-elect of the Oxford Union in the UK who who was sort of de-presidented, removed from his presidency, which was about to take over, because he had reacted in a sort of celebratory way when he heard the news of Charlie Kirk being shot. Now, in its way, is that not the very kind of censorship that you're talking about? Or do you think there's a line between accountability to your employers and to police criminal activity?
No, the left has been depersoning and canceling people for I mean, to my whole lifetime, and it has whipped up into a fervor since Trump's election. But even pre-election, they don't just deperson you; they debank you, they deplatform you. You're not allowed to say anything. They run massive harassment campaigns. The first time I've ever seen you poke the bear, poke the bear, poke the bear, they finally did something, and all that happened was some people lost their jobs. They weren't depersoned. They weren't completely ostracized from all of regular society because they said a no-no word. These were people who were celebrating in the streets, horrific, which they likely contributed to through their own rhetoric, right? That's what actually happened there. And,
language causes problems?
Hang on. All that happened here, right, was for once, the right actually pushed back after you poked us enough times. So, like, look, am I saying that people should get fired from their jobs? No, of course not. But what I am saying is this, is that there's a clear difference between depersoning and debanking people and ostracizing them from society completely, and an employer saying you don't represent my company very well, so you're fired.
Okay.
And that's the distinction.
All right, got to leave it there.
Yeah,
Fascinating. I've got to leave it there, Marc. I'm sorry.